the bigger we're getting, the bigger my problems and my bills are becoming. The projects that now come in have more zeros on the end of them, but that also means that when something goes wrong, when I get a bill, problems, they also have more O's on the end of them. Is this like worth it? Like, again, I'm back here. I thought I'd overcome these problems. And I think the more business owners and people I'm speaking to, the more I'm learning that just is part and parcel of it. Just that roller coaster of the highs are higher, the lows are lower.
This is the We Built This Business podcast. I'm your host, Daniel O'Sullivan. This is the podcast for UK business owners to share their journey, their knowledge, their sacrifices, and their successes. Today I'm pleased to have James Berg on the We Built This Business podcast, talking about Picaroons, who are a full-service creative agency. James, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Daniel. Thanks for having me.
Really looking forward to today, James. So today is actually our first episode of season 3, so thank you for coming on. Should be a really good chat about how you've built Picaroons, and also want to go into the name as well. Where does the name of the agency come from?
So the name Picaroons actually is an old name that means pirate. I was obsessed with pirates when I was younger, from the sort of romantic side of pirates. Then as I got older, I started learning a bit more about pirate history. There's a really good book I always recommend to people to read called Be More Pirate. And essentially it's how your business can be a bit more disruptive. And that book was the business plan for Picaroons. I ended up using it as the structure, the way we work. So I was like, right, this business has to be named something pirate. And thank the Lord that Scallywags was already taken, because that was the original name I was going to give it. And then I was looking at synonyms for pirates, trying to find other things, and ended up with Picaroon. So I think it's worked quite well to not be too obviously pirate, but it's still a bit subtly pirate.
Yeah, because I Googled it, and I think it came out with rogue as one of the... So I wondered, I thought that might have a bit of a history to it. So can you tell us today, what kind of size business is Picaroons? Where are you based, and how many people do you employ?
Yeah, so in terms of the size, I'd sort of say we are able to operate like a big agency, but we are actually a small agency. So we've got that sort of care of a small agency. We have very small core teams. Everyone who works with us is a freelancer, apart from a very, very small core team who kind of keep the engine room going. And then we've got up to about 50 or 60 freelancers or agency partners who we call on for projects, which means we can scale up and down. We are based all remotely. I live in Portugal in a very nice surf town called Ericeira. I jump back between here and London, but our freelancers are all over, mostly around Europe, just I think because of the time difference, it makes it a bit easier, but we do have freelancers in other countries. And yeah, I kind of had this idea of remote working and remote agencies. And then I think in 2020, with what happened, that forced the world a bit more towards being more open to that. And I know that now a lot of companies are starting to go back to in person, whereas we're keeping this remote agency model.
Fantastic. And the move to Portugal, what you said it was around the lockdown time. What inspired the move, and how has it worked out over the last few years?
Yeah, so when part of becoming a remote agency was my sort of dream was always to be a bit of that buzzword, a digital nomad, just jumping around different countries. I'm very active, so I thought I'd be surfing or skiing and just splitting my time across them. And as I started to grow the business, I learned just in a practical way, it's better to have a base. It's uncomfortable, isn't it? Moving around and not having your set routine when you're trying to run the business. And yeah, we had first lockdown. I was in the UK, got my head down, and I mean, 4 or 5 months before that, I'd been traveling around. Then when I came back to the UK for lockdown, that's when I think I realized I was far more efficient and productive with a set base, but I knew that I still wanted to be surfing or skiing every day. Just had some friends that had been in this surf town, recommended I came out here in the September, set it up as my base. The plan wasn't to stay. The plan was still to jump around for a few months at a time in different places. And then, yeah, just realized, what am I doing? This is perfect place. I can be back in London, back in England, see family and business quite easily. So yeah, it's a really nice mix, and that's sort of the fun part is what inspired it.
Fantastic. Well, I mean, it's June here, and in the UK today, I asked my Alexa what the weather forecast is for today. She said it's currently 4 degrees and it's going to be a top of 15 degrees. So, yeah, I think you've made the right decision there, James.
Yeah. And I'm always conscious of not to rub it into people's faces, because it's not it was more of a lifestyle choice of, I work exceptionally hard, as I know you and your listeners know. When you're running a business, you have to work so hard, long days. It is very high stress running a business. And I just found that one of my mentors calls it Alhead, a little holiday every day. So I found that if I've had the longest, most stressful day, nothing changes that. But if I can go jump in the sea and have a surf, go for a walk along the beach, it's much more beneficial to me than when I was in London trying to run the business and jumping on the tube and not managing to really de-stress so much. So I always say to people that I'm very fortunate I'm here, but also I'm a big believer in any of my creatives, any clients, wherever they live. I always kind of say, okay, what are you gonna do tonight? Or what did you do this morning? Like, what was your little holiday every day that took you out of this stress of work, whether that's seeing friends, doing an activity, whatever that may be. I'm very big on the work-life balance, and just trying to, relax ourselves when to offset all the stress that comes with running a business.
Definitely. And there is a hell of a lot of stress when running a business. So I 100% agree on that one. We'll definitely get into that a little bit more later. I just wanted to touch on, so you're a full service creative agency. Can you just give us a breakdown of the core services that you offer?
Yeah. So we do a real mix of things. What I'd say our main thing is going in and either setting up businesses that want a new branding, website, big campaigns, or evolving what they've already done. So it will be websites, brand books, we create a lot of marketing plans, and we do a lot of performance marketing. So whether that's an email campaign, a paid ads on digital, and then video. As much as we are very good at all of them, video seems to be the thing where we really do make things different to others. And then the aim is that we find partners and we sort of fill in the gaps. Because some companies with their marketing, they have a full marketing team, but they're missing a video specialist. Others don't even have a marketing team. So we'll kind of come in and fill that gap until they've got one in place or ongoing. So yeah, it's a very flexible business model, but it really means that anything creative, photography, videography, websites, branding, we've got the creatives in our crew who we can bring in to action that. But what's nice is, because everyone's a freelancer, I don't force anything in. That was my experience a lot of when I worked in advertising agencies and ones that I've worked with in the past, that sometimes of course they say you need copywriting done because they got a copywriter's salary to pay. Whereas for us, we only pay our creatives when we use them. So it means I can be very flexible, and I actually can recommend to a client, here's what you should do, knowing that you don't have an endless budget. And I recommend we start with this thing. Then once you see a return on investment on that, you can reinvest in a paid campaign or something extra in the future. So yeah, it's a nice business model because I don't feel like I have to force anyone in. It's when a client needs it, we can sort of build those teams and build those specialists for them.
I love that flexibility model because that is, like you said, if you employ a copywriter, they're always going to tell you there's lots of copywriting to do, even though it may not be the correct strategy for that particular company anymore or campaign, but they're going to continue, and they're the expert in that area. So they need to be utilized.
Absolutely. Yeah, it happens so much with ads especially. It's taken us a few years, and it's why I think we're really going for a large growth period at the moment, to add the performance marketing part to our package. Because when I used to work in agencies, the media agencies used to hate me because I'd come in the room and they'd say, okay, look, we got 20 million people saw this ad. And I'd say, okay, well, of that 20 million, like, what are the comments? What's the sentiment? How many sales did we get? How many went to the website? So then when they'd show us that and we'd see actually loads of people are complaining on the comments, or we only got 3 leads out of 20 million, that's when I would always question it. And I think It's taken me a few years to find the relevant performance marketing partners and freelancers that I can say, look, I know I can give you a brief and you will say, here's the best way to spend your money across any platform. Whereas the Facebook ad specialists, they always say, you definitely need to do Facebook ads. Even if it is the most corporate B2B offering possible, they'll do that. So I think that's something that why we grew quite organically to do a mix of things is we never just doubled down on one thing, because my background as sort of a marketing strategist means that when I come into a business, I can look at it and go, there's the gap. Here's what you want to achieve. Let's just focus on that for right now. And then in the future, we can consider all those other things.
Yeah. And I think it's completely the right model to go for, because everything moves so fast. Everything's moving so fast. 3 years ago, TikTok wasn't around.
Yeah, very good point. Less than 1 year ago, AI wasn't around. No one was using that.
So, you just have to keep moving. You cannot just say all my eggs in one basket. Let's take me back to when you left school, James, and how you've mentioned a couple of previous roles and marketing strategies. When you left school, what happened from there to take you to starting Picaroons?
Yeah, so when I first left school, so I knew I was going to be going to university to study. And as I spoke before about work-life balance, I was quite big on that. So I took a year off and I worked at a building site for about 6 months, which I think was one of the best things I could have done. I'd worked on building sites and things a little bit when I was younger, but like a proper 6-month hard work stint really just gave me a lot of good thinking time and just, learning the value of like excessively hard work. Then I went to Canada and did 6 months working as a lifty out there and just having a lot of fun, work on the mountain. And then during my studies, a big thing for me was to make sure to have a placement year. I was kind of raised on work breeds experience and opportunities and real life connections. Studies obviously useful to some senses, but I'm a big one actually doing the work. So my placement year during my study was at ESPN. I was a communications intern there, which as someone who's sports mad was the most enjoyable thing. That was when I realized I wanted to move a bit more down the strategic route and start to work on kind of more marketing strategy. So when I left university, I moved into a creative agency called Huge, and they do websites, UX design. They do some other creative, but that was like their main thing, and apps. And they work with huge brands. So Apple, they work with Google, Twitter, like really large brands. So I got a good experience straight away of what does that sort of high-paced creative agency look like. Then I moved from there to a PR agency called Ketchum. And there I was also sort of in-house strategy, kind of a bit of an internal consultant. So I got to move around the different teams and departments being brought in and out of projects. And that's where I really started learning the similarities and differences in different industries. So I would take my learnings from the corporate clients, we were working with IBM, and I would then go and apply that to an FMCG client like P&G. So I started taking learnings across these industries. And because of just my personal background, family and friends being in small businesses, on the side of working with big brands where we were maybe creating big strategies and it would take 2 or 3 weeks till we even sent out a tweet or did something, on the side, I was advising my mates and family in the pub of just go do this thing, go do that really quickly and you'll see some results. And they were getting big results and quickly. So that got me in a bit of a pathway of how can I take the really effective knowledge I've got in big agency land, and instead of having to create a 200-page document, how can I communicate that in a way that's going to be very simple and easy to understand for a small business? I found that a lot of advice to small businesses on marketing was based on, you should say good morning every day because that's what Coca-Cola do. I said, well, Coca-Cola have 50 million followers and they're a massive brand. If you are a plumber with 50 followers who are all your friends and family and you're just going, good morning, good morning, good morning, good morning, it's going to really frustrate them. So I kind of set on this bit of a path of where's the middle ground of really effective advice, but communicated without the buzzwords in a really easy to understand way. And that meant I created my book, which is all based around social media content ideas. that then I was selling that and getting myself in front of small, medium businesses. But then actually someone from Man City ended up using it. Someone from Google ended up using it. So I was kind of using it more to get involved with smaller businesses on the side. And then I moved to McCann, who are one of the largest advertising agencies, and started working with them and really honed in on the different strategies I was doing with content strategy. About anything digital, how can we take big ideas and get results online? The book was really flying then. And then, after a couple of years there, I set out to do my own thing, which is where I ended up with Picaroons.
Wow. I said before the show, I've actually got your book, James, and I'll put it up here for those that are watching on video. And what I liked about it was, like you said, the simplicity. And I pulled 3 words out from it, which is what, why, and how. And the basis of how simple social media actually is when you think about it. And I think from a lot of business owners or people that are setting up, or, people that are in business, it can be a bit daunting, like you said, if you haven't got a marketing team and you haven't got that skill set. So keep things simple and follow the guidelines in the book. But the book itself, so did that actually drive business for you before you set up Picaroons?
Yes, massively, because it's why I'm such a big advocate for people of speaking online and putting yourself out there and not having to go viral and be big. The book has, by now, it's sold a few thousand copies, probably given away another 1,000 for some charities and things we worked with. So I didn't make 20,000, 30,000 copies of the book. Like, it was never supposed to be a big thing. I don't know if you know much with Red Bull. Red Bull are a media house. They make most of their money through their events, their productions. But they're like, we need an excuse to show that we are about extreme and fun. So they created the drink as an excuse to kind of talk about their extreme nature and fun, which I know I'm probably oversimplifying. They created a product to give an excuse. So for me, I always knew I wanted to be able to work from wherever in the world from a laptop. I knew that I needed to do that. I needed people to think of me as a specialist in what I do. And I thought, okay, well, how do I start? I know now it's a lot more common for people to maybe share their thoughts and videos and things online. But I was like, how do I get out there and let people know what I do? So the book was and promoting the book was my excuse to let people know I know some stuff about social media. I know what I'm talking about. I've got advice. So what started happening with the book, and I've always believed, I suppose this is like for most businesses, that good results breed more good results. So the book gave me the chance to work on some smaller businesses, some friends' businesses on the side. I then got some good results for them, which then helped me sell in to slightly larger businesses. What I never would have realized is the person who read my book, who was at Google, did I say Google? Yeah, they were at Google. They then moved to Facebook. Facebook had a particular challenge, and less than 2.5 months after I started Picaroons, and this is a bit of a mixed story of, I got off a train having come back from Morocco as COVID was about to start. I'd left my laptop and my GoPro and my hard drive with the footage from the first podcast I did with my dad on the train, was at one of my lowest points. And then I got a message on LinkedIn from a VP at Facebook saying, hey, I've got your book in front of me. Can you come in for a chat? So I assumed I was getting sued. I was like, I've obviously done something here. I'm about to be in trouble. And they just said, look, we read your book when I was at Google. So at Google, someone had been using it for about a year, but never told me. I didn't know this. They then moved to Facebook, who had a particular challenge. They then said, we want you to come in and write a strategy for us. And I ended up, within 2 or 3 months of starting Picaroons, getting Facebook as a client, completely out of like a side reason. So that's why the outcome of the book was to make people know what I did and give me an excuse and get the ball rolling. But I never would have thought that would have brought in Facebook as a client for me, which then that meant that when I was reaching out to people and saying, here's Picaroons, here's some of our experience, I could say, well, we're working with Facebook. And I never wanted us to have a lot of big brands. We work with Facebook, and we're currently working with Etsy on some trend reports for them. But apart from those two, we don't have any big national brands in our portfolio who we're working with. all of my creatives are from all different agencies and backgrounds. So we've all got experience of working across a range of probably all the world's largest brands, I would say. But as actual Picaroons clients, we've just got those two. But the book got me Facebook, which got me the other clients we've got. So I kind of view the book as no, directly, the book did not grow and get Picaroons out there. But as part of the wider ecosystem of allowing me to share my expertise, getting me the opportunity with Facebook, like it's kind of, the book is the beginning thing that has like started that process, if that makes sense. And that's why I'm so big on trying to get people to make things. Like you for this podcast, if someone's going to start a webinar, if someone's going to do a yearly barbecue, even things as small as that, I'm so big on making things and putting something out there that are related to your expertise or an event, because I think a lot of the time we try and say, what's that actually going to get me? Instead of going, I'm going to put that out there and know that it's going to bring in some amazing opportunities. I think we're so fixed on who exactly is this going to bring opportunities in with? For you now, I could share this podcast once I've been on there. I could have someone who sees this, goes to your profile, checks you out, has no interest in listening to the podcast episode because they have no interest in what I have to say. They have no interest in being on your podcast or listening to any in the future because they read books, but they just see something on your profile and they go, that could be that's exactly what I need right now. And it's those kind of seemingly random opportunities that I believe come from doing certain marketing activities and just putting yourself out there. And it doesn't even have to be in the largest way.
Yeah, just solving someone's problem, essentially.
Exactly.
Yeah. Got so many questions from that, but I wanted to just go back to the actual book itself. At what point did you decide to write the book, and how did you go about writing the book? Did you do it yourself, or did you involve a publishing agent? How did you go about doing it?
So during my mid-20s, when I was working at all those agencies, I had a lot of injuries. So I had a knee operation go wrong, which led to 7 more knee operations. I'd also got cancer in my arm. And at that point, as much as the book, yes, was a business thing, it was also like a bit of a place to put my energy. So where I said to you, my plan was always to work remotely. And when I first started working in London, I thought I'd have enough skills to do that within 2 years. But all the injuries kept me away from sports and things I like doing. And it was about a 7-year period of all those different operations. So during that, I was like, I want to come out of this and not go back to just living, but I want to go, my life's significantly better than it was before. So every time I'd feel sad and all these negative news, I put that energy into making something. I knew it had to be a resource. So originally my book was a guide, and I'm a big advocate of just test and learn. So I thought this guide, do you know the Body Coach?
Yes.
Joe Wick. So he has like a fitness guide. So I thought, okay, I'll make something similar, but it'll be a social media guide. And I spent 2 or 3 years on it. It was really high quality in my mind. And then I tested it out on 10 different people with different businesses, different experiences, and they all didn't get it. They all like, too complicated, there's too much here, I don't get it. So then, like, some of my many good ideas came in the pub with a friend who tested it, and me and him were going through it, and it was like, we were kind of arguing about what was good in it and what wasn't. And then we realized that one specific section, which is where I shared a load of tactics, that was actually really valuable. So then I stripped that out and turned that into the book. So at one point it was a guide. That didn't work, and then it became the book. Then I tested the concept of the book on, again, 10 different people. And again, some of them worked in big agencies, some had their own businesses, some had no knowledge. I always say to people that I made it so simple that your nan can understand it, and that I can prove because my nan was someone I tested it on. So then once I became clear that I had something, so I wrote it all. I had others help me refine the exact wording, but that was based on audience testing as opposed to a copywriter or a proofreader. It was, how is this usable by the audience? What's confusing? What's not? And then I went down the routes of looking at publishing, and I just realized that my reason for doing it, like I said, it wasn't to become famous. It wasn't to be on any charts. It wasn't for any reason other than I need a resource to get me some clients, and I don't need loads and loads of clients. So I went down the choice of self-publishing because I believe that for actual publishing, you have to pay an agent. The agent will then get you in, and then you're responsible to others. I didn't want to be told, I've got to promote it this way, I've got to do it that way. I liked that it was kind of my thing to promote. And then, I just sort of organically, I what's the saying of I walk the talk. So my book is about social media ideas. So I used my book to promote my book. And I just I set up a social media page. I knew that I wanted to go freelance eventually, and that by being a business name, that would make it sound better. So the social media page I set up, instead of just being James Berg, the social media page was called Picaroons. And that was sort of the birth of Picaroons, which now when I think back to it, probably made no sense, because here's a book by James Berg. Here is Picaroons talking about James Berg's book. But at that point, Picaroons wasn't a agency. It wasn't anything. It was just the name of the social handle that I would promote the book through.
Wow. Yeah. I mean, what a journey that was. And I love the testing of the market as well, because I think it was Daniel Precio I was listening to the other week, and he was talking about, you got to make something and then put it out there and see what comes back before you go full on it.
Sounds true. So you must have found the same of just like, how many ideas could you have done? How many things could you have done that you think is great? And you've got an idea of the target audience, but then when you actually go test it with people, you go, all right, that's not quite what I thought. But then it's that key, I suppose, of doesn't mean you give up on it. It means you refine it, you tweak it when you know it could be something. Where's that core idea? And then testing just to get the execution right.
Yeah. Just trying to find where that problem is, what people actually want.
Yeah.
What want solving, essentially. So that led to some speaking gigs, I believe. Is that right? How did that kind of help the business?
So I think it's sort of twofold. One is it built my confidence, because I was terrified, and I still do get super nervous whenever I have to do a speaking arrangement, because it built my confidence. It put me out in front of people. And what I learned was I was actually best in the question and answer section. When people started asking questions and I was just responding, I was surprising myself almost at my knowledge. So obviously I'd done all this research for years for the book, and I didn't realize almost how much I knew. So I think it helped my own imposter syndrome a lot, which then just gave me confidence in other areas and who I was advising. And it got me out there. It feels uncomfortable to say this, but I think it's the same probably for you. I've learned that I'm likable. I'm sure if they got to know me personally, they'll find my many faults. But when it comes to a business point of view, I seem to be likable. And it seems to be that people want to work with me, even if they don't know what it is exactly what I can do with them. And that's where Picaroons came in, and why I'm so big on, I don't want to be another one of those people that's got mates and got plenty of people you can go to the pub and talk business with, but then as soon as you work with them, you're burning the bridges because turns out your service is crap. So that's where then the speaking got me in front of people. Getting me in front of people seemed to make people like me. By them liking me meant they were willing to have meetings with me or asking for meetings with me. And then that was when I'd go, oh, by the way, there's a lot more than what I just presented to you, that like, I think you can make a great video and I think it could look like this, and I've got the person that can do it. And we sort of end up surprising people, I think, a bit. Or they go, oh, actually, like, we kind of just wanted to give you a chance because we liked you, or like chat with you more to see how you can help us, expecting me to maybe end up being a content consultant for them. But then actually that opened the doors for me to sell into them. We could design a website for you. We could do video. So that was the kind of real goal of the goal of the speaking was to get me more like marketing strategy gigs. But the outcome actually ended in, like we say in the test and learn, the outcome actually ended up being more small projects for Picaroons. So again, it was that thing of I kind of put myself out there. I knew speaking gives opportunities. My dad had a carpet shop when I was younger. I don't know if you know BNI. It's like a small business networking organization.
Yeah, BNI, the networking. Yeah, I've been a member of, not for about 5 years, but 2017, I was a member for a year.
Oh, amazing. So my dad was heavily involved with BNI. So he started off as selling carpets on a market stall, got into BNI, and then he was so good at networking, they ended up hiring him to become a trainer for BNI. He ends up owning a whole region, and now he travels the world as a speaker. So it was quite a natural progression for me to see my dad do talks and just how many different, again, seemingly random opportunities came his way. It was quite natural for me to then go, okay, I just know that speaking brings in more. And then I didn't realize, but because I was very young when I'd watch him do talk, when I say very, I was kind of 16, 17 when he started doing talks, and I'd go and watch some of them. I learned a lot from him about the style. So then I think I naturally got a lot of lessons through him that, again, it feels uncomfortable to say, but it's like, because I analyze these things of, one of my strengths is definitely the speaking. So because I do this for clients, I go, right, what's the thing that's going to bring in more business? Let's do more of it. I just was realizing that the more talks I was doing, I was reaching out to people saying, look at this amazing video we made. Would love to talk to you about how we can work together. Nothing. I wasn't getting any responses. But when I was going and doing a talk about how to create your own marketing plan, that was opening the doors for me to then sell in video and website design and these other things. So it was a bit of a like, okay, I started off doing talks thinking it would get me more work. It ended up getting Picaroons more work, which that was what I wanted to push more of. So I do more talks to get them stuff for Picaroons. So it's always, it's an interesting one. I know, do you do many talks? Do you find much benefit in what comes from it?
I haven't yet. It's something that it's only been in the last kind of maybe 18 to 24 months I've had time to do more of that side of things. And it's something I'm interested in.
Yeah.
I think it's just going to be actually committing to it. So it will come, but I think it's going to come probably in the next 1 to 2 years where I'll start reaching out and actually testing the water on speaking. Something new.
Yeah.
Something will be new to me. It doesn't faze me. It's more just time. Just haven't had time to get out there.
But on that, I think it's also repurposing, because my talk is essentially a different version of my book. So it's not, it wasn't, I've got other talks now. It's since then, a lot of people will sort of reach out and say, hey, we'd like to have a talk on this. Can you create it for us and deliver it? Which I'll do. But the main talk that I've always done of how to create your social media plan, the very small beginning of my book, which is the strategy section, that's essentially a more in-depth version of that, which when I think back to it, my talk is actually just a summarized version of the guide, which I originally made for the book. So I've owned a certain lane of, I can effectively and efficiently help you set up with a social media plan. And I've just found different ways to repurpose that and present that. So I think for you, it's probably the same thing. And when you say the time, it's more like, what's the thing that, like you said, the problem? What's the problem they've got? What's the solution I provide? How can I now repurpose that as podcasts, as blogs, as talking head videos, as a talk? I think that as a book, that's more I've milked it for everything it's worth, of the small gap of efficient and effective advice on social media. Then everything else I've done with Picaroons has just been organically come out of that around it.
Yeah, and I guess it's repurposed content in a way, isn't it? Because you've already done the knowledge, you've done the research, so you've gained the knowledge, you've done the research, and then you're now repurposing that on stage.
Yeah, or I suppose it's even repurposing the knowledge. Which is right, here's the knowledge, how can I just repurpose this and just get it in different ways and get it out there? I think that's where most of the clients we work with, what I'll end up doing is going, okay, here, just like I do for myself, of here's the 100 things you'd like to say, but here's the real core thing. Let's just double down and take that core thing and turn it into webinars and events and books and just be known for that. We always say it's like throwing a rock into some water and there's that ripple effect. It's like, be known for that, the ripple effect will get you other projects and clients and things. But like, what's that real focus thing that you're just going in on, and just keep talking about that and repeating that.
This podcast is sponsored by Team Building Experiences. If you're planning a team building event, away day, or corporate event, then check out team-building-experiences.co.uk and state podcast 15 in the comments to receive 15% off your proposal. I wanted to dial back on your dad. So he was a speaker, BNI member. You've got a show that I've come across. I've listened to a couple, but not all of them. And it's James. Is it James with Dad? Is that?
It's called Chats with Dad.
Chats with Dad.
Chats with Dad.
Yeah. Can you tell us how that came about and what was the outcome of that podcast?
Yeah. So again, I keep repeating myself on some of these like random things that seemingly happen. So Dad is very traditional. He comes from that small business background. He's a real kind of genuine guy who's got really good advice. I come from a background where I went into sort of corporate land, as I call it, and I learned all about tech, and I studied and I read books, and he never really read any books or did anything. He just had the experience of running his carpet shop and selling to people. So what was happening was, as I was starting the business, we always have chats. We had more and more chats of, we go to the gym together and we come back, or we'd be sat in the car outside our house without going in for an hour and a half, just talking about a specific topic. And what was happening was, I was presenting a problem to him or a solution or something that I had. He was then coming back to me with real world advice, which was triggering a thought for me. If I'm going, oh, that's like this book that I read, or this thing, or I was saying, well, have you heard of this before? So I was sort of prompting him via my problems and challenges. He was giving me really good advice. So he does a lot of talks, as I said, but again, they're very structured. Whereas I was like, actually, his real world advice, I think that will help a lot of people, because it's certainly helping me. So I don't remember I think I just thought it, but nothing was really said. I was always trying to get him to do marketing things. And then he just said to me one day, he said, right, someone's obviously convinced him. He's like, I should do a podcast. I think it'll get me out there. I was like, yeah, it would. He went, I think you should do it with me. And I was like, well, I don't really know why I would do it, because there's no reason to promote me other than, again, just doing things. And then as I thought about it, I was like, well, actually, yeah, those chats we have are probably pretty useful for people. And if for him, the bonus is to get him out there. For me, I was like, actually, if Picaroons creates the podcast, if we design the title, if we make the marketing, if we do all of that, that's actually a way for me to show our podcast production capabilities. We haven't done any yet, and I'd love to put something out there so we get more podcasts in. So that was kind of the reason for doing it. It was, all right, well, let's just call it Chats with Dad, because that's what we have anyway. Quite a few people call him Dad because of the relationship he has with them and how he teaches them. So I was like, okay, that for me is the clarity is, it's about him. I'm there adding some element to it. I know all of his stories. Like, he's got some very funny personal stories, which do have business lessons in them. But I'm like, no one would ever hear those, but I know those because it's my dad, so I know it. So it meant that we just had a really nice dynamic. And I think that my favorite review, so we actually, very proud of, we only had 5-star reviews. I had about 40 of them. And only one of them was from one of my drunken friends that never actually listened to it and jumped on just to say it was great. Apart from that, they're all genuine reviews. And my favorite one was when someone just said, this is just eavesdropping into a casual conversation that happens to have some like golden business nuggets in it. And that made me really happy, because that was my aim, that I'm very conscious of how many podcasts there are out there that aren't actually offering any value. And it's just, I'm sure you've seen in those ones when people are just talking with nothing to say. But I was like, I just want it to be where I can share the advice of dads that I know is good with others. And if we just get a few listeners, no problem, because I'm sure it will change quite a few lives, his stuff. So yeah, I think we've had, again, it's about 4,000 or 5,000 listeners now. Nothing huge, but good numbers for us. And then again, I've had 2 or 3 people come to me and say, hey, I listened to the podcast, heard what you do, or would love to talk to you about producing our podcast. I've used the production examples of what we made to pitch in to other clients that haven't listened to the podcast as a look, here's how we would produce it. And yeah, we had quite a few people, so quite a lot actually, probably at least 20 come to us and say, specifically the episode of goal setting, that it really changed their way of thinking and doing things and inspire them to take action. So that's always a nice thing as well, to hear, and what I know that Dad can do. So yeah, it's we've done a couple of seasons. We may do one more in the next few years, but now it has to have that business reason for it. So yeah, we're very conscious of not stretching it out where it's just the two of us, maybe bringing in guests, etc.
I love that. And what a really valuable thing for you, to have with your dad as well. That it's going out there.
There's
people
that
are
as
listening.
well, yeah. There's that as well. I always said to him, if he pops his clogs and he's never got any of his advice that can be handed down to different people, that would be a tragedy. So that's what I'm most proud of, is that it can keep being listened to in the future. It hasn't got a timestamp on it. We still get about 30 or 40 listens every week without really promoting it. So yeah, and that's the thing. It's like, okay, I think that's why I'm conscious of anyone who believes in what they do or their value. Even if you don't get a million listeners, you don't have a massive audience, make something, whether it's a book, a podcast, some videos, that can be handed down in the future should you become really successful, or even just should you want to hand it down to your children or grandchildren or whatever that may look like. I think it's a shame that so many people have that imposter syndrome to not just go, well, if I'm not going to be famous, what's the point of me doing it? Like, it's not going to be massive. Why would I do a podcast or a book? Whereas I'm like, actually, but you might be massive in 5 years, and then you're going to be way too busy to do a podcast, but then you've got this high value thing that people can go back to and listen to.
Yeah. I wanted to talk about something you've made recently. It's called Brew with Berg. Could you tell me how that's come about and what it's all about?
Yes. So basically, we needed to do a push for business. We were at the point where, right, got some spare time for me now, finally running the business, and I want to grow the business more. What could we do? And we looked back on all the things that have been done over the years, like we said, my talks, etc. What can we get out there? And I used to run something actually for one of the BNI regions. I worked for one of them, for the Essex region, and they used to do something called Coffee with Brian. So as one of their founders, they'd have coffee and he'd do a webinar every couple of weeks where they could just ask him questions, or the members. When I did some social media for them, they said, okay, we'd like you to do a webinar for us, like Coffee with Brian. I said, okay, what, like Whiskey with James, as a joke? And I like that, that's a good idea. And I said, no, I was joking. And that's a good idea. So Whiskey with James was born, and it was me drinking whiskey once a month, answering their social media questions. It actually ended up evolving into probably 40 minutes of was me presenting genuine results and advice with 20 minutes of questions. So yeah, as my confidence went up, so did the amount of whiskey that I drink on each one. But it was really effective and it was really useful. It meant I could just bounce ideas off people. And yeah, as a team with Picaroons, we were just thinking, what could we do and what's been successful in the past? And what can we do quickly and easily? I was like, do you know what? Whiskey with James was good. I'm not willing to keep up the whiskey side of it. So we changed it to a more sober version, which was Brew with Berg. And then within a week, we designed the assets. We'd sent out 1,000 invites. And it's just a weekly free session for people to jump on and ask me any and all questions. So the first couple, we had a number of people on. The last few, we've probably had 1 to 3 people on them, which has meant that those 1 to 3 people are essentially getting a one-to-one consultancy session with me where we're properly going through their business. We've actually, in under a month of doing them, or just over a month, reached our new business target that we had. So I'm not saying it was just because of Brew with Berg, it was Brew with Berg alongside everything else. And now we're going to be reducing it to make it probably just once a month. So once a month event where people can come on with any challenges, opportunities, questions they've got. They can join for the whole hour. They can join for 5 minutes and basically just put it in the chat box. Or if they'd like to, they can come on camera and ask. And then I will just share my view. And I'll share some tips and tricks. I kind of, again, with that imposter syndrome of, I now back myself with my experience over the years. Even if I don't know the answer, I can direct someone to the right part of it. I've got an assistant in my team that whilst we're doing it, she's filming and taking loads of video clips for me. So it's not just a live webinar, but it's a way for us to produce some content. And yeah, it's really enjoyable. It's really informal, and it's something we're definitely going to keep going. But I think now that we've achieved our business objective quite quickly from it, we're going to just scale it back.
Yeah. And it's something that my marketing team are going to come along to as well. I know
Amazing.
Sam and Dan have, I think they've either registered or it's in the calendar to come along. So they'll get a lot of value from that. Now, the actual outcome, obviously, like you said, you've got an outcome from it, and now it's something that you can look to scale up, do once a month. You can always ramp that up in the future and go back to weekly as well, if it's starting to be a real good lead generator and also provide real value.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm sure it's the same. You inspired me actually when we spoke about your podcast strategy and what you've committed to doing. And I think it's about knowing what you're going to commit to doing. But as I said, the outcome of I would love, and I was actually speaking with someone today about Brew with Berg, based on some other things I'm going to be launching hopefully in the next year. I think it's likely I will probably need a newsletter at some point. I also think it's likely in the next few years that there will be a reason for me to start a specific podcast where I'll have guests instead of just me and Dad, or I think I told you I've got the podcast with a real life pirate. Instead of me and a person for a specific outcome, I think there will become a need to just stay constantly present. At the moment, I need a bit more of those quick results, which is why the outcome of Brew with Berg was this quick thing. Whereas I think you always want to be having some things ticking along. But now, as you said, that podcast will probably be called Brew with Berg. The email newsletter will probably be called Brew with Berg. So it's almost like, I think, as you probably have heard, and I'm reflecting on myself here through this podcast, of I'll come up with an idea, I'll execute on it, but I will very quickly change what that execution is based on how the market responds or the results. So I will, with Chats with Dad, it was like, let's just do it and see what it's like. We did one season, loads of people were then taking value and asking us for a second season. And we were like, okay, this brought in leads for me from a production point of view. So we upped the production value of the second season. And we made sure that we had even more of Dad's nuggets in there because we knew they worked really well. So I think it's that thing of, as you said, it can scale up, but how it's going to scale up, I don't know. And I try and remind myself a lot with the business of, I go, do you know what? We want to make 20 new videos this year. That's where we're really going to focus. But then all of a sudden, we make a good contact. So a lot of our work comes through referrals, who keeps referring us in for websites. Well, I haven't achieved my video aim, but I have achieved the website, which actually is achieving the business outcome. And that's why I always talk about what's the business outcome. And when we get there, then we reassess what's the execution and what does that look like. Instead of, I'd like to do loads of videos, and then I find out everyone wants me for websites. Why do I want to do videos? Because I want to increase our revenue. Okay, well, websites will increase our revenue. So it's the same outcome. It's just those different things to get there.
Yeah. And I mean, there's so many avenues as well, isn't there? You can go to do, a once a year conference, like you said, a podcast, a newsletter, and it all becomes under that Brew with Berg brand that turns into a community that you then are able to provide lots of value to, but at the same time could be your clients of the future. And that's
nice idea. Yeah, I hadn't thought about it so much that way, but yeah, you're right.
Let's see it happen, James. Let's see.
Yeah, let's see how it goes. Yeah, exactly.
I'll come to the conference if you organise it. If you do it in the UK, I'm happy to go to Portugal as well.
No, I'm aware that if I did those things, it's still very much UK audience as the main people we're working with doing. So yeah, I'd do a UK one. That's a good idea. Maybe a Brew with Berg live. Then this is the thing as well that I say to people is, the more things you do, the more you got to talk about. And that's why I'm so big on action of, okay, well, if I really sit down at a point with my wider team and go, right, what should we focus on or what could we say? Well, I've got the Chats with Dad podcast. I've got podcasts I've been guests on. I've got the podcast with the pirate. I've got a podcast with my mentor and a book with her that's coming out later this year. I've got potentially a Brew with Berg podcast. I've got my book. I've got a couple of side businesses. And I think that's where I enjoy working with people probably similar to me, where they go, I've got all these things to do, but which one do I talk about, knowing that will grow the other ones quite naturally. So my book now, I don't really speak about that because normally when I do an event, that's when I sell quite a few copies of my book. So, okay, the focus is more on the events, which sells that. And I think it can feel overwhelming for us when there's loads of things we can be doing and saying to then go, which one do I actually do and say? And I think that's something I need someone like me to come in and do it for me and go, right, here's the main focus. I'm good at it somewhat, but it's hard when it's for yourself, isn't it, to do your own thing? But yeah, I think just doing things, that's what I just keep telling people to do. Do as many things as possible and see where they go.
Definitely. I mean, you're the epitome of a visionary. You know, you're constantly creating, like you say, new things that obviously, you know, come back as opportunities.
Amazing opportunities. And I do think that's where it's key, as we touched on earlier with the stresses of running a business. I do think it's key as well to try and stabilize things. I'm very much in the mindset now of like, I'm trying not to add more things in. I'm trying to get more out of the things we've done and really execute on them instead of building and the next thing. I'm trying to really go, okay, here's our core thing we do, like with Brew with Berg. Let's focus on Brew with Berg. That's a marketing activity. Let's also focus on sharing, here's something interesting Picaroons has made. And those two things can be our main marketing activity. Otherwise, let's just focus on trying to get as many startup branding website packages. Doesn't mean we don't do the other things. Like I said, that kind of throwing the rock analogy, but it's like, what's our main focus? Because I do think the problem of being that kind of ideas person can be that you're always on the next idea and the next idea, but have you actually given enough to squeezing out more of that previous one? And that's something I think which I'm always trying to balance with, is not always adding new things, but just stabilizing some of the things we've got a bit more.
Yeah, definitely. And I've definitely learned about that in the last few years, because I'm similar to yourself. I like to constantly start new things, and then I hand them over to someone who's better than me to try and grow it and continue it. And with this podcast, I wanted to make sure that I've committed to it by committing to, you know, releasing an episode every week for 5 years, putting it out in the public domain so that it's not just me holding myself accountable, and also focusing on it as well, as in like doing the best job I can for as long as possible alongside all the other things that are going on.
Yeah, I mean, it'll be some amazing opportunities, won't it? If you think what you've achieved through kind of jump, like this setup on someone else, all the amazing things you've achieved by doing that, imagine what you're going to achieve now through this one thing for like 5 years committing. And yeah, that's why I said it inspires me to like, okay, if I can find some things that we can just repeat. I mean, we've only been going for 4 years, and it's like the amount of stuff we've done and new things we've added in, it's always exhausting when I think back on it. So I think similar to you, that I want to be able to commit to, all right, yeah, Brew with Berg, I just repeat that for years, and over years see what type of return that brings.
Yeah. I think with longevity as well, like things take time to get right, and it's that trial and error. And things only fail when you stop doing them. So
that's a good point.
It's continuing to overcome the down parts for long enough that you hopefully see the good parts come through. And and obviously there is probably a method in madness there, because, you know, sometimes the good parts may never come through and you have to kill an idea. But
but I say, how do you decide when it's time to, how do you define when it's like, okay, now we need to kill this idea? It's so hard to do.
I can only put it down to gut feeling. I think you can have all the analytics in the world, unless they're obviously all pointing, you know, the opposite way to what you're feeling. But if your gut feeling is this isn't going to work, no matter how much effort you put into it, I think that's the call you have to make, and that's what every that's what every entrepreneur goes through. That they have to love it, or their gut is telling them that it's going to work out in the end, and then they've got the passion to continue with it. And it's not easy to
so true
to say if that idea is going to work, because who knows? But 3 or 4 years time, suddenly, you know, you look at all the big giants. Not all of them are unicorns. You know, a lot of them took time. YouTube were around for, you know, I think there was a company before YouTube that came up with the exact idea of YouTube, but they were just too early. And as a result,
so interesting, yeah.
So the idea was right, but it was just the wrong time.
Yeah, and that's the thing. I think that that's the business journey, isn't it? I'm like 4 years in now, and we've done some amazing things. We've always been on, not always, maybe after a year and a half of doing it, I would say we've been on like the edge of serious success. But that tipping point we haven't quite reached to get over to that I'm still working unbelievably long hours. Like I'm still doing a lot to get it going. And it is that kind of, okay, year one, we've got many, many years. And I think I heard this, like most businesses, they don't like startups don't go past 5 years, I think. And that's at the average. So it's that to me, I think will be a big marker. Will be 5 years, I think, in January. Congrats. I think that would be the big, I hope, let's see if we get January. So like, I'm feeling good for it. I think that will be the tipping point when I will probably change mindset and go, okay, like we've done that part now. That's kind of proved it to ourselves. Let's focus in and like, we've done all the exciting projects. We've done loads of big ideas, but like what's going to be like our kind of bread and butter, just rinse and repeat, focus on that and let the other things happen. I think that's where we'll get to. And yeah, it's a very good point about the YouTube one. What's the other one? It's like the iPod wasn't the first MP3. There's MP3s before iPod, but it's just remembering that. An interesting thing that I'm having to analyze for myself is at what point do you go, maybe we're not going to go over that tipping point. Maybe this, which isn't a bad thing, it's like maybe this is kind of like the ceiling and let's just stay here and just stabilize this. When do we stop pushing it? It's something that I'm always trying to figure out, I think.
Yeah. I think it's one of the hardest questions to answer as well, because only you can make that decision.
Yeah, but I like what you say. I think you're right. It's gut. I think your gut, there's been times when I've known it can't continue in a certain way that we've been. And maybe 2-3 weeks of that terrible feeling has meant that my focus has changed into how can we refine a certain offering? How can we do something on the side that'll bring in some immediate income or whatever that may be, or change the way we're working? So I'm kind of at the moment, I'm like, okay, that gut feeling's only ever lasted for a few weeks before that gut feeling has led to a certain action, which brings our fortunes back around. So at the moment I'm going, okay, I'm learning to live with 2 or 3 weeks of that negative gut feeling is a good thing. It's probably if I end up getting to a situation where for months I'm feeling like that, that's probably when I would start massively reassessing how do we scale down potentially. Because that was the aim of Picaroons as well, by being a freelance network that we can scale up and scale down very quickly. And I think it will be that defining part of how much do we try and scale up will be what happens over the next year.
Yeah, definitely. Have you ever thought about kind of throwing in the towel?
Yeah, a lot. I say throwing in the towel, there's different versions. So I think because I come from the background where I was working in agencies and I got quite high up, I knew that I could move back into agencies in a similar position. I'm not saying the same agencies I was in, but it is a position, sort of content strategy, digital marketing. I could make that decision. I think for me, the difference is that I've committed to this, what I call the life spectacular, which is running the business, enjoying the business, surfing every day, living in Portugal at the same time. So for me, I think I would, if I was to scale right back down, it would be to going into an agency, moving back to London, and that would kind of be scaling down on my lifestyle as well as the business. The then part I've had is going, well, I really like my lifestyle. So would I actually be willing to almost take a career change in something that's far more stable and calm, but I still get to surf every day and enjoy here? And then in terms of the way that Picaroons is for throwing in the towel of, like I said, we're set to scale up and scale down. So let's say if Picaroons didn't get any clients all of a sudden, if all of a sudden clients just completely dried up, we had no clients. Because we're not in a product-based business, because I don't have an office, because I don't have that full-time staff, I don't have to close down Picaroons' website. I don't have to. So when we've had times before and I thought I maybe need to throw in the towel or we need a quick injection of income, I've then gone and taken on a freelance gig on the side, and I've taken on one project that in 1 month will bring us another 4 months of income for Picaroons. So my thing is kind of that more like, I wouldn't call it throwing in the towel, but it's more like giving up on the dream. Of giving up on the dream, just go back to, I will just be a freelancer or content strategist or have some projects that come in. Picaroons has a few small projects through the year and it continues to exist, but it's a very, very small thing. That's almost monthly at the moment, because the thing is, I know we'd spoke about this when we first chatted, of the bigger we're getting, the bigger my problems and my bills are becoming. And that's been my biggest shock. I always knew cash flow. I got taught that by some very smart people around me, just like cash flow is king, like that's all that matters in the business. But I don't think I ever realized that bigger business means, as much as the projects that now come in have more zeros on the end of them, but that also means that when something goes wrong, when I get a bill, problems, they also have more O's on the end of them. And that kind of fluctuation, as someone that comes from a creative background, not like a business background, I've found that very hard to deal with. And why, when I say almost every month, is because almost every month we've lost clients because we did a great job for them, because we helped them achieve their objectives. So they went, okay, we don't need to spend anymore. Now we've had a massive down of cash because that was a lot they were giving us. But then at the same time, a new business deal has come in through another referral, which has then taken us back up there. And then the accountants, because we're getting bigger, have to do more work and set us up in more ways. So now I get a bill that takes us down to there. And it's that kind of roller coaster, which I'm getting more and more used to. But when you're in the highs, I'm sure you have this, you're a genius and the way you set up your business is amazing and you're brilliant and what a visionary I was and my future's going to be so good and like, who else am I going to hire? And then in the lows, you kind of go, oh, is this like worth it? Like, again, I'm back here. I thought I'd overcome these problems. And I think the more business owners and people I'm speaking to, the more I'm learning that just is part and parcel of it. Just that roller coaster of the highs are higher, the lows are lower.
100%. And the ups and the downs, they never stop. I think
I'm trying to accept that. I'm getting there. I'm getting there. The more I'm going, okay, this up, I'm going to enjoy it, but I'm going to know it doesn't last.
Yeah.
And I'm trying, and I'm getting there, of when the lows come, that same mindset of, I'm not going to enjoy this, but I'm also going to remember this won't last. And I think what I'm learning more from our different advisors is that kind of that flexible nature of, I got told at one point, have X amount of cash in the bank for a rainy day. Well, that X amount that I was aiming for now needs to be XX because we're much bigger. So I think it's that kind of ever evolving nature for you as a leader. And that's why these conversations and hearing from people such as yourself, and it's so valuable, I think, when you hear others just say, like, no, that is it. Like, that's how it's going to be. So you go, okay, how do I then prepare for this? How do I not try and not be in the situation, but how do I ride out the situation?
Yeah, I had a problem a few years ago where every time we hit a target or every time we hit a goal, I wasn't happy. I was like, what's next? And I didn't take even a moment to think about that we succeeded. I just was instantly like, right, well, we need to set a new goal now. We need to get to this size, or we need to, bring in this amount. And I think it was during the pandemic, to be fair, I had some time and took some, time out to read books, and I kind of got a bit more aware of celebrating success. So when we came back from the pandemic, we now have kind of quarterly incentives where we take the team out if, we do well, and we do, we have annual, and we have lots more going on with regards to celebration within the business. Rather than we've achieved, we almost don't say anything, we just carry on, and then we just go, we make it even harder next time. Almost wanting to fail in a way, almost wanting that.
Yeah, it's that thing, isn't it? It's like that, like it was the hedonic treadmill. It's like once you get one thing, you forget this is what I wanted. You go, right, what's bigger? What's next? But I think that's the thing I'm trying to balance is I really want stability, but I just also am learning that just isn't the nature of the way we operate. Is we go in, we set people up with things, we get them going. We sometimes get small projects on the side, like the performance marketing stuff I was telling you about, where we'll manage them ongoing. But really, we are in the nature of our strength is setting people up to go do it themselves. So that by nature means we don't necessarily have those ongoing relationships. We have it where people come back to us for smaller projects, which was fine when we were a smaller business. But now that we're a bigger business and I've got more people that we want in there, even though it's freelance, we've got a lot of people on retainer. It's that kind of balancing act, isn't it? Of how much growth do you want? Because there is definitely a direct correlation in growth and problems. And it's like, how much more do I want? But then knowing that if you're in a growth period and still feel I'm still young, like I'm still like, okay, I've probably got to make the most of these opportunities I've got. One of my friends, he is the head of design at Wise, and he sent me a card, and it said in the front, it said, "Don't F it up," and that's just all it said in the front. I was like, that's a good point. Like, it's like, I've got this big opportunity right now. I've just got to shoot for it and see where it goes as much as I can. Keep the mindset of like impatience in getting it, and yeah, maybe when I'm much, much older, that's when I can go, okay, now how do I calm down? But like right now, even though I want the stability, I've just got an opportunity of opportunities and I've got to just go for them.
Yeah, no, 100%. Picaroons' future, where do you want to be in 5 years?
That's a great question. Where I'm in 5 years is I would like us to have 5 to 6 clients who we've been working with for 5 years. I'd like clients that we just work with every month on repeat. We just run the marketing process. They trust us. We understand them, which then means those 5 are enabling us to keep the team small and core as we are. But then we've got more of the fun side projects, more videos. We've got a salesperson that's bringing them in. I don't aspire to us as a team to be much bigger than we are. I just aspire for the projects to be more and more interesting. And I think those 5 or 6 clients who we've got really good relationships with, that would fund the rest of the business, that then we've got the freelancers and people on retainer. That means we can work with, we kind of started off by working with a lot of charities, a lot of small businesses who didn't have a lot of budget. And I'd like to go back to, okay, here's what we can do with you with your low budget, and making small projects for really amazing businesses that we enjoy to make, but that it doesn't matter that we're not making as much on them because we're sort of funded as a business via these 5 or 6 larger clients. That's sort of what I'd like. And then I've got a few side projects, but my main thing I really want to start doing is I feel like the lifestyle I live, some of the things I've overcome and some of the opportunities I've been given, I think I've probably got a lot of advice that will help the next generation of creatives who maybe doubt themselves. So I've got a talk, which is how to get any job you like in the creative industry. And I'd like to really start rolling that out more. So I'm hoping that Picaroons is nice and stable, and I can spend a lot more time sort of inspiring, I hope, the next generation of creatives to actually like back themselves and make that leap and get some amazing projects while having fun. And that's my main thing, is having as much fun as possible. And I'm much better at surfing, hopefully, in 5 years.
I love that. So almost like creative imposter school, something along
I like
those.
that. That's a good idea.
Something along those lines.
This is where you can, one conversation, one thing I've really learned, I know, sorry, it's not a question, but it's just a thing that you've inspired to say there and you've taught me, is just one sentence from one person can just change everything.
Yeah.
Because I've actually been struggling for how I position that creative. And you just saying creative imposter school is genius. Okay, that'd be the Daniel O'Sullivan creative imposter school. I'm literally going to write it down now.
I'll take it. I'll look out for it in the next 6 months.
Amazing. There's my accountability now from you.
Got 3 questions, just quick fire. First one.
Yeah.
If you weren't an entrepreneur, what career path would have you gone?
I think I would have been like a painter or like an artist. I think I'd have gone to art school, and I think I'd have done that, and I'd probably be really struggling and really frustrated. So then I'd probably be doing something on the side. Yeah, I think that's what I'd have done.
What advice would you give to someone trying to start a business in 2024?
I think find a few mentors or people who've been there and done it, and just absorb from them. Just what books should I read? What courses should I study? And what should I do? I think follow them. When they might be very famous people, it might be that you've got actual access to them. I think sort of 2 to 3 really well-chosen mentors that know this, at least one of them really knows the space you're in, and the other 2 maybe know the mindset, the way you want to live, and just do everything they say. Just take it all on.
That's brilliant, because that is, we haven't actually got onto mentorship, but in a minute, when you talk about where to find you, I think it'd be good to mention about when your new book is out. But yeah, mentors for me are so powerful, and they don't have to be someone you know, because of the creative space, you've got so many people now posting their beliefs and their thoughts all day long. Final question. What podcasts do you listen to, James?
I don't really listen to podcasts. Would you believe that? I don't. I'm a reader. I'm not really a listener. If I do listen to podcasts, no, I normally get sent a specific episode about a specific thing. I wouldn't say there's any podcast that I listen to, which I know is bad when I've got podcasts.
Not at all. No. Well, what books do you like to read?
That's a much easier question. So I love anything on creative mindset. I read a lot of creative books from like creatives that have been there, done that, but specifically the kind of more rogue ones. And in the last few years, I've actually started really liking books that are a bit more on like spirituality and mindset, not from a overly hippie reason, more because I feel like it's a bit of a gap in my knowledge. And the more I'm learning about the way my mind works and the way that people's minds work, I'm finding that's actually helping me be a better leader. And then the kind of third main one, which I think touched on what we said before, is those who've been there, done that. Shoe Dog, the Nike story. I'm reading the Netflix one at the moment. Just how did those massive companies come about? And it's not saying I want to be massive like them, but it's like, okay, if you learn how they did it, I think it really inspires your journey.
I've read Shoe Dog, and wow, what a book.
Yeah, it just reminds you, it's like, it really reminds you, like you said, of, I don't want to speak for you on this behalf, but I don't aspire to multi-billion-pound business. But it's like, okay, if a multi-billion-pound business went through these same problems that I'm going through and these same doubts, I could surely shoot for £1 million business. I think that's why I just love those books, and I think podcasts and just soaking up knowledge from others. I've been very naive and very wrong in the past to think that I've come up with an idea or a process that hasn't been done before. And when you get going, you just learn that it's the same for everyone. So the more that I can read of other people in the same situation, the more it'll just guide me out of it.
Yeah, I've got a lot of comfort from problems that I've experienced, finding that other people have also experienced those problems multiple times. And I think it's
so much comfort, isn't it?
Sometimes when you're, the business owner, the loneliest job in the world is the fact that all the problems end on your door, and you think you're the only one with those problems.
Yeah.
When the reality is,
there's no one's turn to.
Yeah,
even this podcast has made me feel so much better.
Fantastic.
So thank you.
No, good. So James, how can people find out more about you?
Yeah, so I think I'm very active on LinkedIn. James Berg, search me there. Also, you can look at Picaroons, picaroons.co.uk, and I've got a website, jamesberg.net, and that's sort of the best places to find out about me, get links going. But hopefully this podcast made clear that I'm always happy for a chat. So as well, turn up to Brew with Berg, we can have a chat. I'm always open as well if you just wanted a one-to-one. Sort of get in contact that way. Like you said, I find I learn as much from people and potential clients as pitching to them. It's not just a pitch, it's a nice way just to meet people and learn from them.
Yeah, and so your book that you mentioned earlier that you're releasing with your mentor, when's that out and what's it called?
Yeah, so that's called When Facts Have Feelings, and it is about how to get into the sort of strategy side of marketing, and we're planning on that being out at the end of the year. Similar to what we spoke about before, we're defining whether we want to go the publisher route or we want to do the self-publishing. That'll be out end of the year. But again, like on all my socials, I speak about all the different various side projects and fun things that I do. Do just connect with me there.
Lovely. Well, that was another episode of We Built This Business, and we'll be back next Tuesday.